Welcome to Tuesday, December 29th, 2020. Well, the winter storm is going to move on out. Now it's just going to be chilly and kind of blustery as we go through the rest of 2020 into 2021. The storm's moving out, but we're still going to have travel problems today. It was just enough snow and wind and ice to make travel really difficult here over the last couple of days. That'll be the case again today. It's going to be a chilly, occasionally windy pattern on the plains. But at the same time, while we have other systems coming, they're mainly going to impact the mountains. We're going to probably have another winter storm in the Midwest Corn Belt region as we get to the end of this week. But in terms of major storms for this part of the world, we don't see any, at least on the plains. We're also going to spend some time today on a long-term discussion. There's a lot of moving parts as we go into January. There's a lot of different scenarios that could come into play, and we're going to talk about those scenarios. One thing that you always have in a La Nina is you have a lot of variability and you have a lot of wild fluctuations in the weather, and that's always something you have to watch out for. We'll talk about that here going forward. This is today's upper level charts, and you can see that we have this trough coming through the west. It's moving rather quickly. A piece of it's going to be left behind here. It won't do much, but now you can see that the system is east of the divide and heading away. So that's going to allow for improving weather this afternoon, tonight, and into Wednesday, but it's still going to be kind of windy out there. The next weather system to come our way is right here, but it's splitting into two pieces. One piece will go north, one piece will go south. So it's not going to end up being a big weather maker for the plains, but it will produce mountain snow as we get into New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. So the mountains of the region will get a little bit of snow, a few flurries on the plains at the very most, but the northwest winds aloft coming into the region will keep us chilly. Not terribly cold. We don't have any bitter cold Arctic air coming, but it will be chilly. And with the wind occasionally getting gusty, that'll cause some travel problems. Now, by Friday night into Saturday morning, that trough in the southwest heads into the Midwest and the Great Lakes, and here's another little wave coming. Again, it's little, it's not much, but it's going to race on through. And then this is Sunday morning. Another little wave comes, and it races through. Notice a more west-to-east flow with the jet stream. So this is going to keep temperatures from being too cold. So we're going to go into the last days of 2020, into early days of 2021, with chilly conditions, but nothing really cold. If you want the cold, you can see all the blue up there, but notice it's not making a push south, at least at this point in time. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time showing you what's going on in the northern hemisphere. So this view, I'm going to show you a few maps. It's kind of hard to get your bearings, I understand that, but this is like looking from space down on the top of the globe. So the middle of this right here would be the North Pole. Now you can see the United States here for reference. We've got Africa here. Here's Europe right here. And then we got Siberia. We've got China over here on the other side of the Pacific here. What I want to show you here is basically where all the cold air is right now. And you can see it with the gray and the blue. The really cold air right now is locked up in the high northern latitudes, but it's also in the western hemisphere. It's over on this side of the North Pole, so it's upstream from us. Also, I want to show you this right here. You see this building ridge of high pressure in the North Atlantic? This is a very formidable high pressure ridge, and what we're seeing in the next 2 to 3 weeks is that this bigger ridge of high pressure sort of maintains itself. So essentially what this becomes, this area right here becomes what we call a block, to where the cold air will stay bottled up in the western parts of the northern hemisphere and not really have a chance to migrate this way. So when that happens, we've got a lot of cold air potentially upstream, but there's no signs yet it's going to come south. Now going forward, here's that block. This is for next Monday. This is a very impressive block pushing up all the way just east of Greenland. So just think of this as a big wall that all of this cold air just kind of keeps bumping into, and it doesn't have a chance to move out. So what tends to happen here is you see this very strong flow of jet stream energy pushing into the Pacific Northwest. So you're going to continue to see above average precipitation in this part of the world here, because basically all the storms, since they're bottled up here, have got nowhere to go. So they come in here, they crash, then they kind of spin up around again before they dissipate. What we're going to watch is the potential for some of this to give an opportunity to head south. We don't see it yet, but it's tantalizingly close. And with this big blocking ridge of high pressure in the North Atlantic, we have seen this in winters past, where when you have a blocking high in the North Atlantic like this, then the opportunity for the lower 48 states and Canada to see winter weather get going, well, it's certainly on the table. This is all the way out to past 10 days from now. You can see the blocking pattern is still basically there, although it's a little bit further more west. And you can see that there's a bigger trough coming into California by then. But 10 days out, actually past 10 days out, you can see the really cold air is still in the Western Hemisphere. Now, you can see that this is where we are right now. These are temperatures as of yesterday relative to normal. So anywhere you see the oranges, these colors here, these are above average temperatures. The purple, the green, and the blue, well, all the cold air, you see this? All the cold air is in Siberia. It's also in China, at least central and northern and western areas of China. So this is the really, really cold, bitter winter cold air. It's on this side of the globe. With this blocking pattern setting up right here, it's going to stay bottled up there. Whether or not it heads south is something that we're going to watch heading into the new year. Adding a new wrinkle to all of this is a stratospheric warm-up. For those of you who watch this podcast, we occasionally talk about these stratospheric warming events. Now, that's just a fancy word for the higher reaches of the atmosphere having a brief period of warmer temperatures. And what that does, up in those high latitudes, those polar regions, when the stratosphere gets warmer, due to the expansion of air, because it's warmer, it pushes the cold air close to the ground south, off the poles. Now, that cold air could go this way, it could go this way, it could go this way as it gets pushed. But with a stratospheric warming trend coming around the 7th and 8th of January, with the blocking pattern in the North Atlantic and all of the cold air centered right here, well, it has an opportunity to come south. We don't see it yet. Not saying it'll happen, but I just want to give you some insight in the long term in what we're watching. Because if all of a sudden your long-range forecast does a major flip from a day that looks mild to a long-range forecast that all of a sudden gets sharply colder, that's why. A lot of times in a La Nina, though, you'll see these Arctic air masses get bottled up. Now, I want to show you this. The long-range trend, this is from the European model today. This goes out 46 days. So you got to take this with a grain of salt. This takes us all the way through February 12th. So this is a long period of time. But notice all the blue here. From Central California to the Pacific Northwest, this means a really strong active jet stream pattern, which is typical in La Nina. So what this means, you see the green going out onto the plains now and into the Great Lakes? This is above average precipitation in this area here. So what may happen as we get past the first few days of January into the second, third weeks of January into early February, we may see some pretty active winter weather zipping its way off the west coast of the Pacific Northwest and coast to coast across the country. And if we look at the long-range outlook with the Arctic Oscillation, it continues to be all the way through the 13th of January in the negative phase. And the negative phase of the Arctic Oscillation is a cold and sometimes stormy weather pattern for the western United States. I throw this graphic up. We'll show you this graphic probably several more times this winter. But in a typical La Nina pattern, where you have these cold water temperatures near the equator, right here, you tend to have two phases. You have the more mild phase, where the jet stream is more of along a straight line, not as many dips. You don't tend to have a severe cold pattern, and that's exactly kind of what's happening right now. And that's what's really been happening since fall. A more mild flow of air in the United States, no bitterly cold air. That's typical in La Nina. But sometimes in a La Nina, you'll get these buckles in the jet stream, and that Arctic air has a chance to come south. And when it does, it is usually January and February. So the table is set for something like this in maybe 7 to 14 days from now. We'll see. We could also go right back to this pattern here where the jet stream's more straight. So if you're a weather watcher, it's just something interesting to watch because we're heading to a few days here where there really won't be much going on weather-wise. Here's the update with the La Nina. I just showed you in that graphic here where the cold waters are in a typical La Nina. Well, here they are. Here's the latest sea surface temperature report across the Pacific, and you can see that very impressive wedge of cold air from West to South America all the way across the tropical Pacific regions, and that is a classic La Nina, and it continues to be of moderate to strong strength. So I threw a lot at you. Have yourself a good Tuesday. We'll see you on Wednesday.